Greetings, malicious mutts. I'm David B. Jacobs,
And I'm Devin Shepard.
and we are Cadaver Dogs, minus Rob Pacercia, who I think he's in Jersey right now.
Jersey, he might have a wedding. He's
I
doing
don't know.
something that's not
Yeah,
being here with us today.
belated Mother's Day, maybe. Mother's Day is an ironic thing for this episode.
Dark.
So the good news is, you know how often I sound like I'm underwater? We think we've solved that. We
We think
think.
we solved it. We're doing a
Pretty
lot of tech
sure.
stuff. For like
It
3
it
people who aren't technically working on the tech side of things to figure out how to do microphone and pod work is
yeah.
amazing.
At the end of last episode, Rob casually said, like, "Oh, David, have you tried turning your microphone around?" And I'm just like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, like, are you talking to the front of it or the back of it?" And I'm like, "There's a front and back." So, so hopefully, we'll sound better this time.
Hopefully. The good news is you sounded
Oh
great
man.
in the bone reviews of the last episode. Really fantastic,
Yes.
David. So, David, how are you doing?
So I'm doing amazing, Devin. I am alive, which almost wasn't the case. So I'm okay. Don't freak out, Mutts. But I did almost die 2 days before this recording. I was at a party and I had peanuts that were in food that was catered that I didn't think there would be peanuts in that. I was so excited to learn it was vegetarian. I didn't think to ask about the other thing. And then I went into anaphylactic shock. So I just pulled a friend and I had an EpiPen and I went to the hospital. They put IVs in me. They gave me a nebulizer. They gave me intravenous medicine things, steroids, Benadryl, everything. It was a lot. They gave me a second EpiPen because mine had actually been expired. Oops. Uh,
So, David's alive.
so that was an adventure, but I made it. I'm very much alive, and I'm very happy to be alive right now.
How does it feel to have this renewed sense of life and appreciation? I'm not gonna put words in your mouth, but do you have an appreciation for this life after almost dying?
I mean, yeah. Most of yesterday, I was just listening on loop to the song from Next to Normal, "I'm Alive."
Oh my god,
Which
wait,
is
were you
actually
really?
ironic, yeah. If you know the context of that song, it actually makes no fucking sense that I'm listening to that one, but
Well, I'm glad that you're alive and that you are not covered in hives. You look great.
thank you! Yeah, I'm told that I wasn't swelling too much, but I turned really, really, really red. I kinda wish someone had taken a picture of me, but no one did because they were too focused on making me not die. So
Yeah.
I was mostly concerned in the moment about, like, not ruining the party.
That's such a thing.
I'm like, I don't
That's
wanna ruin everyone's night
oh my god.
just because I might die in a few minutes.
So polite, David. Excuse me.
Gotta have your priorities straight. I did leave my sweatshirt at the restaurant.
Oh, maybe we're gonna have to make Cadaver Dog sweatshirts. I would wear that.
Yeah!
Yeah. We should do a Cadaver Dogs hoodie. Oh, and I don't mean to take your, life-threatening moment to, like, advertise our podcast, but the T-shirts, we are still selling T-shirts on Etsy.
Woo!
We're gonna have the post in our just go to our socials. It'll be there in the links. But I updated the photos so that they actually look better. I swear to God, these shirts are not like horrible. They're really comfy. We really love our shirts. I literally wear mine like all the time. I love that shirt. But the photos looked awful, so I updated the ones on Etsy. So hopefully they look cooler now. Anyway, that's me taking your life threatening moment and turning it into an advertisement for our t-shirts.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I
you're
also want
welcome.
people to buy our t-shirts. If no other good comes out of my nearly dying, then we sell a bunch of t-shirts, then it was worth it.
Well, something else that's gonna come out of you, not nearly dying is us talking about the films that we have today, which is actually about dying, so young, which is well, that's kinda sad. I'm sorry, was that a dark transition there?
There's no escaping the dark transitions this week, guys. We're gonna get into some heavy topics. Our heavier topics will be in our second film, though.
Yeah, definitely. I might have to take a real oof.
Yeah, just be aware there's gonna be some heavy topics about school shooters and self harm. Is self harm a theme?
Yeah, I think self-harm and definitely some depression and lots of violent stuff in here.
Yeah,
You know, the typical shit that we talk about every single podcast,
yeah,
just all the
yeah.
content warnings. And with that, let's go into our first film, shall we?
What do you think of when you think of a nerd? A Poindexter with glasses, a shy kid with stuck up parents, an instinctive fear of all the bigger kids who steal his lunch at knife point, a reluctance to talk to women? Arnie Cunningham is all of these things, the perfect nerd. Except he's in love with Christine, a 1958 Plymouth Fury hardtop painted in bright blood red. Arnie buys Christine on a whim, very much in spite of protests from his friend Dennis, who insists she's a piece of shit car. Everyone tells Arnie she's a piece of shit. His parents won't let him park her at the house. Mr. Darnell at the auto shop thinks he's crazy for trying to fix her up. And fix her up Arnie does, and soon Christine is looking sleek as ever. He doesn't wear glasses anymore. His hair is greased. He's dating the hottest girl in school, Lee, who has no further character development. Of course, Lee is still a bit concerned. She's afraid that Christine is jealous and wants to kill her. Things take a turn when the local bullies break into Darnell's and trash Christine. They break her windows, dent and puncture her frame, even defecate on the dashboard. But fixing her up this time is easier than it seems, for Christine is finally ready to show Arnie her power. She can heal all on her own. A self-repairing, self-driving car where the mileage goes down instead of up. Now Christine starts picking off Arnie's bullies one by one. As the body count rises, cops become suspicious. Even old Darnell himself joins the body count, which sucks because he's the best character. Now only Dennis and Lee have a chance at bringing Arnie back to Earth, at grounding him in something other than this obsession with his car. They prepare for a showdown, bringing an excavator truck to level the playing field. But as shrapnel flies and Christine crashes into a window, Arnie himself flies out. The presumed self-driving car had a driver all along, now impaled by a glass shard, his dying moments resting on his beloved's hood. They finish the job, crushing Christine beyond repair. Or at least, that's what they hope. This is... It's just called Christine. I know, it's a really unexpected title. From 1983, directed by John Carpenter with a screenplay by Bill Phillips, based on the novel of the same name by Stephen King. John Carpenter and Stephen King, motherfucker.
Oh, hell yeah. I know, we were talking about when we were coming up with this episode, how Stephen King now, I think, has appeared in the pod you said 5 times?
I think we said this is his fifth. There could be one we looked over, though. We did Pet Cemetery, Dead Zone, Night Flyer, Carrie, and now Christine.
Yeah, so this is the 5th. Yeah, I think him and John Carpenter.
Yeah, this is our third John Carpenter.
Yeah, so they're the most covered filmmakers, I think, that we've covered so far.
Yeah, I don't think any other director has more than two. There are several directors with two, but I don't think any other directors sit three.
Yeah, spread out a little bit. We should get some other really good ones in here. But focusing on the film at hand, I'm just going to start us off with the overall basic question, which is, what do you think Christine the car represents in this film?
Totally. I mean, it's a big deal that the car is from the 1950s and like
Yeah.
plays all this 50s rock on it, all the old school rock and roll. You got your buddy Holly, who's a theme this episode. You've got your Elvis Presley shows up, Chuck Berry. They're all just coming in and out of the radio, kind of at whim. It's kind of up to Christine to set the music.
Oh, I love that. She always picks the best songs. I don't know how that works, how she can just like tap into, I guess, radio frequency somewhere always play the same song, but it's interesting. Anyway,
Yeah,
continue.
And even when you look at Arnie's glow up, he reads to me like he's turning into like James Dean or something. That he feels like he's out of the 50s or 60s as he gets more hot, so to speak.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you did mention in your summary that he greases his hair, and, I mean, this film
Yeah,
takes place in 1970 78, 76.
something like that.
I did find it interesting that, like, oh, I didn't realize that that was, like, a style then, but, yeah, I think you're right, maybe it was just a throwback to the '50s there.
Yeah, I think it was a throwback to the 50s. It's weird because in some ways it represents his coolness, but also like Lee never actually likes the car. I mean, some of this I think is just like maybe sloppy writing. Like she says, "Oh, he doesn't feel like Arnie anymore," and I'm like, you never knew him before he had this
Right?
car. Like what? How do you know that? How do you know what he's really like?
The only person who knows what he's really like is Dennis.
Yeah. But I mean, we can ask if that is Roy's really like, but we'll get into that later. The car, I think, also talks a lot about that sense of nostalgia. I think it is a sense of danger of nostalgia. I understand Stephen King had his own interpretation, which John Carpenter kind of refutes. Did you get a chance to look into that?
Not as much, no.
Well, just what I saw was I'm not going to be quoting this exactly, but Stephen King has talked about growing up in the 1950s, and he has basically said he has no bad memories of that time. And we don't want to get too much into the adaptation because neither of us have read the book, but I understand that in the book version of it, it is more clear that Christine is the previous owner, LeBay, basically used sacrifices and whatnot to imbue the car with powers. And it's his spirit, I think, that's haunting it or is possessing Arnie or something like that. I don't know. I
In the
haven't read the
book.
book.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
The movie contradicts that because the very first scene of the movie is Christine on the manufacturing line already being a dick and slamming her hood on some dude's arms and then choking a black guy because this is one of the movies where the black guy dies first.
Oh my god, it's true. I didn't even realize that. Wow, and he's the only black character in the movie.
Yeah, that trope is usually a little bit misquoted. It's really just that the black guy dies, but in this one the black guy actually dies first.
Yeah.
So, okay.
They went through such lengths to make sure it was the same car that King described in his book, which I found fascinating
Mm,
because apparently the the car that King described in the book did not fully exist. Like, he described it as like a four-door kind of car. The car that he described actually never came in red, but they like and there's only like
mm.
3,000 of them that were ever made, blah blah blah. Anyway, they went through great lengths to make sure that the car remained the same as the book, which to me says like so much of like it is really important that this car is this quote cool mobile from the 50s. Like it needed to have that vibe. And when I hear you talking about Stephen King seeing the car as kind of like this nostalgia for his childhood or him growing up in the 50s, it's not something that I really got from the movie as much. Like, yeah, Arnie does dress like the 50s a little bit, but nowhere else in the film do they really talk about this nostalgia. And never does Arnie say like, you know, I'm dying to like be in the past or I'm from another time or like there's nothing else to hint at this nostalgia for the 50s other than the car itself.
Yeah, I think if anything, the movie is a critique of that nostalgia. It's saying the 50s were not actually an innocent time. This car was always evil. It's not possessed. It's just a mean car.
Uh-oh, are we going to talk about Reagan now?
We can. It's funny you describe the car as cool because it's actually even in its time, this was not a popular car. It was always kind of seen as like a shitty model.
Yeah, they call it shitty in the movie. The
Yeah.
bullies are like, "Oh, that shitty car."
But not just because it's an old car from another time, but also just because it wasn't even popular then. It was like King didn't want the car to be anything too special or flashy. It's flashy because it's red, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I
And
can
yeah,
mention the
you can
Reagan
totally
thing
talk about Reagan because yeah, you can talk about the Reagan thing.
because
You bring up
we
Reagan this
have to.
time.
Let's talk about Reagan.
Reagan! You
The
knew
point you
it
were
was coming.
it was coming. It's a movie, it's a horror movie in the '80s, and it's Carpenter. I mean, like, come on, he did They Live. Yeah, so you were mentioning how, like, the representation of the '50s may not be as shiny and as cool as we remember it. A lot of people who have analyzed this film talk about this time in the '80s that was nostalgic for the '50s. We were seeing a lot of films and a lot of pop culture reverting back to this time, thinking Back to the Future, thinking American Graffiti, and then comparing this to who comes in, but Reagan, with the idea of wanting to get back to that golden time, the nuclear family, everything that we've talked about on this podcast.
Make America
Essentially,
great again.
yeah. I mean, that's really how it feels. Essentially, like, going back to this glorified time of the '50s, where, as we can see, if we think about that in the representation of this movie, is not as great as we may have remembered. Hence, maybe that is what he's saying with the black guy dying first. Like, "Oh, yeah, remember the '50s? Yeah, black people didn't have rights in the '50s. Not really. Not really."
I'm so proud of you, Devin.
What'd I do?
Just by talking about Reagan, I'm so
Oh,
proud of you.
did it.
I just
I brought
want
him
you to
up this
know that.
time. Yeah, I mean, what I was saying before though is like there isn't a lot of talk about the '50s and this nostalgia present in the car, at least for my viewing of the film. For me, Carpenter kind of took on his own vision of what that meant, this nostalgia. I mean, how I read it was nostalgia is basically wanting to be in another time, right? It's like the love of not being present of where you are, which I think is very present in Arnie. Though he's not necessarily nostalgic for the past, he is kind of wanting to get out of his present in the search for a future. We do see him struggling with where he is in his, he's being bullied, like you said, he's a classic nerd, but he's having a lot of trouble with his parents who are like controlling his every move, which is incredible to watch. But he wants this sense of freedom, right? To, like, get out of the place that he is now. And that's kind of how I see the car represented through nostalgia, is just like, what are the themes of nostalgia further dived into, is how I see Carpenter kind of talking about it.
These times are not necessarily better than now. They're kind of creepy, even, and only looking at the good things is not an accurate depiction of how it really was. And there was still all this darkness back then as well. I mean, we've talked about the 1950s on this podcast before. They were not a
Mm.
sugar coated time at all. And I think Carpenter's filmography in general, not to get too off topic, but Carpenter's filmography in general, I think, has made comments toward that. That like Halloween, I often interpret it with its suburban setting as being like a death of the American dream. That this white picket fences nuclear family that we've all come to think is like the new great Americas. It's not that. It's they're lined up for a slaughter.
Well, we've talked about the car. I do wanna focus a little bit on Arnie. One other thing that changes from the book to the film is the fact that, like you were saying, the car is possessing Arnie. Is that what happens in the book from based off of what you read?
From my understanding, it is much more clear that Arnie is being possessed in the book, and specifically with the spirit of LeBay, the previous owner, who's mentioned in the movie. They still talk about him. His wife and daughter were still killed in the car, but in the book, those were sacrifices to the car. In the movie, it's more framed as or implied that the car killed them because Christina's jealous and
Yeah.
that LeBay just didn't care the same way that Arnie doesn't really care when people are being killed. So long as he has Christine. No shit ever gets in between him and his Christine.
But the movie makes it a little more, I guess, ambiguous if it is in fact the car. Well,
Yeah.
not yes and no, right? Like, I mean, when Lee is in the car, we do see her like the car acting up and like moving to kill her, right? But in the end, when it is we do finally see that Arnie is driving the car and comes out of the hood. So it's like this weird vague of like Christine does kill, but like Arnie's behind the wheel of the car.
Can we linger for a moment on that scene where Lee is choking? Because I think it's an interesting scene. So what happens in it, if you don't remember, you haven't seen the movie, they're at a drive-in. They've had a fight because Lee was like, "I fucking hate this fucking car. It is so weird, and you're more in love with the car than you're in love with me."
But to give a little more detail to that specific moment too, Arnie is pressuring her to go further and she's uncomfortable. She says she's uncomfortable because she doesn't want to do anything in the car. But leading up to that moment, it is like hinted at they're going to be a little more sexual, and that is something that they do mention and fight about. And that's Arnie's perception of it too, is that he thinks that she doesn't want to go further sexually.
And then a windshield wiper mysteriously snaps out of its place a little bit for no reason. Arnie gets out to fix Christine, and then at the same moment, Lee begins choking on her sandwich. That's what happened to me the other day. And the doors suddenly lock. So Arnie is going up to the driver's side door, trying to open it, but it's locked from the inside. And then some random other guy, just someone who happened to be nearby, opens the passenger side door, gets Lee out, and does the Heimlich maneuver, while Arnie is running up and telling him to get his hands off of her. He later says that this is like, I thought he was attacking you or whatever, but it's a weird scene. It's like the
Mhm.
doors are supposed to be locked, but that guy had no problem getting in. So was Arnie trying to help her, or did he not really care?
Oh, no, I think at least my viewpoint is that he is, and I don't remember if we see, Lee opening up the door. We do see her struggling with the lock, but it's also, like, if you were from the argument of, like, this is Christine trying to kill Lee, Christine could
Yeah.
not be ready to show herself, possibly, so she unlocks the door for this mysterious man. Though, if Christine really does care about Arnie in the way that she shows that she does, like when he's driving and takes his hands off the wheel and she guides him so that he doesn't crash, you would think that like she wouldn't let someone that he loves die, especially not before he gets what he wants sexually.
It's kind of a fatal attraction thing, isn't it? Like she will kill. Christine is a very jealous car.
Yeah, yeah,
She
fair.
wants Arnie to herself. Even like the radio cues seem to be her trying to cock block him and stop the sex from happening. Like, you should only have sex with me. Haven't you seen Titan?
Yeah, to done. Yeah, and I guess, like, thinking back, the first death, when she's coming off of the assembly line, like, we don't see that happen either. It is implied. So I guess the first death that we really see that happens with the car is the bullies. But then, okay, but what about Darnell's death?
Yeah, I mean that one was 100% Christine. That one's completely unambiguous. There's no way to claim Arnie was in there. It is still weird because like some of these deaths you can almost chop up to like the car is just not functioning properly because it's super old or whatever. But I mean, then you also have like it literally heals itself. Like there's clearly supernatural things happening. The car is
Yeah.
definitely alive. Some of the more ambiguous moments I think you can discuss in a metaphorical sense, but not in a I theorize that this car is not actually alive sense. It's just metaphors for things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there would be more argument to this is, the car may not actually be alive if this film was more from Arnie's point of view. But this film isn't really from
Hmm.
Arnie's point of view.
Yeah.
It feels like Dennis's point of view for some of it, and then well, I guess for most of it, it feels like Dennis's point of view.
Yeah, the point of view kind of shifts and churns and it's kind of unafraid to go into anyone's POV at any moment. Because you're right, like the scene where we first see Christine self repairing, if the movie had more ambiguity as a whole, then you could totally read that one scene as Arnie is imagining that she has this power. She isn't actually self repairing. But then she does it like 5 other times all in front of other people. And also, like, no, a car can't take that much damage and then just be okay. It was literally on fire at one point. And then the
Yeah.
next morning, it's just normal.
Yeah, impossible. And, like, even though Arnie does say, "Oh, yeah, like, I just found the pieces and blah, blah, blah," like, yeah, maybe if they set up the world enough that that could be believable, then, like, maybe there'd be more ambiguity, but it's just not. It's just not believable to me. But
Yeah.
am I correct that you, while watching this film, you did have more of an argument for Arnie being the one to actually be killing people?
Yes. So I don't know if he's necessarily in the car more frequently. He's definitely in the car in the climax. He might have been in the car during some of the murders, like Mooch's murder. I think he had an alibi for Mud and Chop's murder, but the first one, the first bully who gets killed in the alleyway, he could have been in the car. But the bigger argument is just that I think he's very much an alibi to it. I think he's very much like, yes, Christine, go hunt down those fucking bullies and murder them. Like, I know that he was possessed in the book, but I feel like the things that make him possessed aren't in the movie. I feel like that argument isn't here anymore, that it was
Yeah,
lost in that adaptation. And I very much read this as no, this is the real Arnie. I mean, you have a moment. I think we already mentioned it. We have the moment when Lee is like, "Oh, it's he's not acting like himself," and I'm like, "What? What are you talking about? You only met him after he had the car. How would you know what he's really like?
right.
This is what he's really like."
And I mean, like, looking at it from the point of view that I mentioned earlier of, like, the car representing Archie's freedom, him growing up, I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's really hard to look at any movie about a 17, 18-year-old and not say it's about a coming of age film. Like, this is Arnie coming into his own. He's obviously struggling with where he is, but, like, we see him, I mean, he likes himself, he becomes more confident in himself, and we always wanna see that in young people, and so it is him becoming who he truly is. And yeah, that's not who Arnie was before, but like he figures out what he likes, right? Like he likes this car. No one else likes this car, but he
yeah.
likes this car. He figures out what he's good at. He's good at fixing cars. Like in the beginning, the bullies are in the workshop class, and Dennis is like, "Why the hell are you taking workshop, Arnie?" Like he's being confident in his choices. I think is really what we see throughout the film.
All his life, everyone has always made decisions for him. His parents are very strict. They won't even let him play fellatio in Scrabble. Even though he would have won if he'd played like I'm on his side there. He would it's a real word. He would have won. He knows what fellatio is. Come on, mom, you're cheating. But
Straight up.
regardless, he's had all the bullies controlling what he can and can't do in school. He's forced to go to teachers for protection. He isn't able to defend himself.
Yeah.
And now he is learning how to become who he is. He is no longer going to be taking all this shit from everyone. And what you get is scary. He's a fucking monster. But that is the real him, I think. I don't know if many people agree or not. I'd love to hear from you guys. Tweet at us, shoot us a message on Instagram. Let us know if you think that Arnie, if this is Arnie. Do you hold Arnie accountable for his actions? That's a
Yeah.
question we want to know.
Yeah.
Because I think we should. I think he's totally responsible.
Yeah, because no matter what, in the end, him and Christine do become codependent. It is a toxic relationship. And
Yes.
Christine can represent that independence, can represent Arnie becoming himself, that confidence. But in the end, no matter what, he is behind the wheel and they are one in the same. And all of this actually like brings me to this quote that Arnie has at the end when he's in the well, near the end when he's in the car with Dennis and he's describing love. Do you remember this scene?
Yeah, yeah. Remind me, but I think so.
Dennis is showing his concern in Arnie and is actually opening up and being like, "We're really me and Lee are worried about you, and this car." And Arnie's trying to explain like what he's feeling. And he describes it as love. And he says, "Let me tell you a little something about love, Dennis." And he goes on to like a little bit of monologue, but at the end of it, he says, "You know, when someone believes in you, man, you can do anything, any fucking thing in the entire universe. And when you believe right back in that someone, then watch out, world, because nobody can stop you. Nobody ever." And through this argument, I see himself as the one loving himself. Because otherwise, I mean, if we look at Christine as representing something, then who is this love that Arnie is describing being with? You know, is it him and is it really him in the car, or is it him and it has to be him and something else, you know, if the car is meant to represent something.
I think he does kind of see the car as a person in that sense. And I feel like Christine does have agency, and you could do like a whole other podcast just discussing what are Christine's motives and what is Christine's personality and trying to parse that out. And I
Yeah.
guess a lot of people who might argue that Arnie's possessed would point to like, well, this has happened before. This happened with Christine's previous owner. To which I would just say, in reality, like, there are also people who are manipulative and wind up in toxic relationship after toxic relationship. And there is a draw there. There is something inside of Arnie that he saw Christine and said, "That's my car."
Mhm.
No one else saw that. Like, Dennis looks at that car and said, "That's a piece of shit." Darnell saw and said, "That's a piece of shit." Like, no one
Or maybe
else
that's what
saw what
connects them
Arnie
to
saw.
it. That's what people see when they look at Arnie, you know, except for Dennis, except for Lee,
Yeah. He describes that himself. He said he had never seen something as ugly as himself, something like that was his line,
something like that.
but he knows he can fix her up.
Yeah, and it's kinda sad that, like yeah, that he's been living this life where no one believes in him and then sees himself in a car and ends up destroying everything that was actually good in his life, you know, his best friend, a potential girlfriend, a life as a mechanic as well, and I mean, ultimately, his life in the end, that he's so
Yeah.
blinded by the way everyone else views him or the way he thinks everyone else views him that, he ends up going down this dark path.
Before we move on, I just want to drop that I think a lot of our conversation got pulled from this video essay, so I want to plug that if that's okay.
Please.
It was by Matt Draper. It's on YouTube. Stephen King versus John Carpenter's Christine, the American Graffiti of Horror. So that's on Matt Draper's YouTube channel. Strongly recommend that video essay. It's really good, and we pulled quite a bit from there.
And we'll put the link in the show notes as well.
Do you want to introduce the next movie, Devin?
Eva and Franklin are a young couple in love, happily living in a carefree life in the city. And then Kevin is born. Our story is told through flashbacks of Kevin's childhood as present day Eva is struggling to cope with the life Kevin has left her. Her neighbors are hostile, screaming at her, hitting her, and covering her house in red paint. She works at a job she's overqualified for, with a guy who is very handsy, and she's alone. Except once a week she visits Kevin in prison. But why? As a baby, Kevin was relentless, crying constantly, but only around Eva. As a child, he was cold and difficult, refusing to be potty trained, but acting like an angel around his father. After Kevin's sister is born, Eva began to notice Kevin's violent tendencies. Did he kill Celia's guinea pig? Did he poison Celia with drain cleaner? Or was it really an accident? Through it all, one tender memory remains. When Kevin was a boy, he was sick, and Eva read him Robin Hood. Kevin cozied up to her in a moment that eventually defined him. As he grew older, Kevin became skilled at the bow, just like Robin Hood. And it was the bow that he shot at his high school classmates. And it was with the bow that he murdered his father and sister. And now Kevin is in prison, and Eva is living with the consequences. This is We Need to Talk About Kevin, directed by Lynn Ramsay, screenplay by Lynn Ramsay, Rory Stewart Kinnear, based on a novel by Lionel Shriver.
We need to talk about Kevin.
Wait, what? Oh, I get it. I
We
get it. I
we
get
need
it.
to we
Because
need
we're
to
talking
talk
about it
about
now.
we need to talk about Kevin.
Got
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah. It took a second to get there.
Just real fast, I know there's a lot of business going around about Ezra Miller. We're not talking about any of that. We don't care. That is not relevant at all.
Well, we care.
Yeah, we care.
We we
But
we care.
for the context of this current episode, that is not what the discussion is. So please don't expect any of that. No real life Ezra Miller drama. That said, if we're using he, him, we're referring to Kevin. If we're using they, them, we're referring to Ezra.
Great.
That out of the way. What I want to bring up, you mentioned some of the nonlinear structure in your summary, and the way this movie is told narratively is very interesting and I'm not overly unique, but it is like a style. It is a choice how it's cutting
Yeah.
back and forth. So, do you think that everything we're shown is meant to be taken completely literally, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I think, every time that we are presented with a narrator, in this sense it is Eva, going through flashbacks, I think we do have to think about, is their viewpoint a little shaded, or is it in this case colored red, in a way. There are many times in this movie where I'm wondering if a lot of this even happened for certain points. I mean, something that is carefully done throughout the film is never actually seeing certain moments happen. I mean, for instance, the guinea pig, right? Um,
Mm.
how do we find out the guinea pig died? It isn't explicitly said. Eva goes to the sink, looks down, and we are presented with the idea that possibly the guinea pig is in the garbage disposal. But isn't explicitly said, even the sound design isn't necessarily like used to show that there is a guinea pig in there. And then the very next moment, she uses the drain cleaner, pours it down the drain, and places it next to the sink. We don't see her put it away. The very next scene, we find out that Celia drank it. Whatever happened
Poured it in her eye.
ends up losing an eye. But we again don't actually see, was it Kevin, or did Eva actually leave it out and it did affect Celia in some way? Moments like that are shown throughout the film, and I think it is interesting that it does allow room for questioning if these things actually happened or if they're the way Eva remembers them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ambiguity, things like that. There's even just some ambiguity in terms of like, is it an unreliable narrator tale? There are some moments that I explicitly read as surreal, like the shots of Kevin in the gym. I don't think those are shots of what how he actually did it. I don't think we
Mhm.
actually see how he did it. I think this is Eva's imagination of how he might have done it. Because
Right.
it's weird the way those are shut up. He's like doing a celebratory pose or something in a completely empty gymnasium. It's very weird how that scene is set up. And then there are things like his interview on TV when
Mhm.
he has this chilling monologue talking. We'll get it more into the monologue later, but it's all framed as this is some interview that he did in the days following the event. That doesn't happen ever. Like no news station interviews the murderer. That
Yeah.
is not a thing, and it's so weird that that's in the movie. And I almost don't believe that's real. I don't believe that he actually gave that interview or ever said that. I think that that is Eva's imagination, that not like a hallucination, but like she is imagining what he might say. She is trying to apply some motivation because she can't figure out why he did this.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really key because in the last scene when she visits him on does she visit him on the 2-year anniversary? That's the last scene.
Yeah.
And she asked the question, why did you do this? And he says he doesn't know anymore. He thought he did, but he doesn't know anymore. And I totally agree with you. We see Eva in present day remembering these memories and going back through her whole entire life with Kevin, trying to pinpoint and trying to understand, why he did this, or at what point did she know that he was going to do this? At what point did he know that he was going to do this? What led him to do this? Like we see her at these specific points in time, like looking back and trying to figure out why.
She's like remembering when he was a baby and wouldn't stop crying, and how he would stop crying when his father is around. And the implication is like, oh, he's this infant child who's manipulating his parents and putting on a nice face for his father while letting his mother know, like, ha ha ha, I got you. He's an infant. Is she right? Is that a correct assessment of what happened? Or is he just a baby who in one moment was crying and in another was not? She also like tries to drown it out with a jackhammer and just has this baby right next to a jackhammer, which is, as someone with a niece right now, I would not do that.
Yeah, because you brought it up, if I'm good to speak on the motherhood angle a little bit, and I think motherhood is ever present in this, and that moment that you see her, yeah, next to the jackhammer, I think is a hard moment to watch because you know it's hurting the baby, but at the same time, the moments leading up to it, you see her in pain and you see her struggling with her new motherhood. And to me, this film really is about the struggles of motherhood and specifically probably someone who doesn't necessarily or wasn't ready to become a mom. She does look back at her life before Kevin, her life with Franklin in the city in kind of this romantic way. You know, them laughing through the streets. I mean, them just laughing and being in love in general. Their relationship, even Franklin's, is fraught throughout mostly because of Kevin. But we do sometimes see
Yeah.
these loving moments between them.
Even then, though, she was a travel journalist, I understand. She is a very independent person before
Yeah.
Kevin came along. She would travel the world and write about it. The opening scene is her in, I believe, Spain at a festival that I forgot the name of, but it's a real festival. And it's a great opening image because it looks like she's basically swimming through guts. So
Yeah.
it is emblematic of what's to come, but for her it's also just this moment of true ecstasy, of actual
Yeah.
joy. I also took away a potentially controversial take from that, which is that I got the impression that the baby came from there and that Franklin's not actually the father. And I don't think he knows
Huh.
that.
Can you walk me through how you came to that? Because I didn't get that read at all, but I'm
I
curious.
think a lot of it was just the way it's edited. Like there's definitely no hard evidence, but then it goes from the scenes of Spain. I think Franklin texts her. He's like, "Hi, I really miss you. I hope you're coming back soon." And then the next scene, she's back and she's pregnant. And it just, to me, opened that possibility that she had had some
Hmm.
sort of affair while she was overseas, and that
But you don't see
the,
her with a guy overseas at all.
not explicitly, but she could have been.
Personally, I do think that's a stretch because
Okay.
it's interesting, and I'm trying to see. For me, I get a different read because, like, I think with the editing style, I mean, as we said, it's surrealist. It does cut through time in a really strange way. So yes, maybe that was an editing moment that was meant to imply that. But at the same time, it's like you said this moment for her in Spain is ecstasy. And that was my reading as well. That her life before Kevin was the one that she really, really loved. And then Kevin happened. And she's obviously not very happy as a mother. She's really, really struggling. And that's kind of how I saw that as like two moments of pure joy and then one of pure fear, where the life before her and the life that she had before is completely going to be ripped away. Even the moment when Franklin suggests they move out of the city, like, you see her personality being stripped away more and more. I don't wanna, like, put down your read because I think, like, it's there and it's meant to be ambiguous and, like, you could read it that way. I just took it in a very different way of, like, it's hard to say that she was unfaithful. Like, that's putting a lot on her, you know?
I'm not saying it as a thing to bash her. I don't care if she sleeps with another man, that's fine. It's this trope in a lot of movies about the demon children or whatever, where sometimes the parenthood is unknowable. That, like
Mm.
in The Omen, without spoiling too much, he's swapped at birth. His parents aren't his real parents, and eventually you find out who is his biological mother, and it is not what you think. Rosemary's Baby has the same trope. Like this trope's all over demon child media.
Sure.
In We Need to Talk About Kevin, I feel like we are shown a lot of comparisons of how Kevin is Eva's son, but he never really feels like Franklin's son. That Franklin always comes off as this outsider who thinks he understands what's going on but does not.
Sure, sure. I definitely agree with that Franklin bit. For me, saying that possibly Kevin's the son of somebody else does kind of take away from this idea of like, this is a hard motherhood and a reality of motherhood that does exist. I feel like when you say that, like, Kevin could possibly come from somewhere else, it takes away a little bit of the importance of showing this type of mother on screen, one who is struggling, because in a sense, you take away some of it.
I hear that. That trope can be harmful as well. So
Yeah, I mean, even so, the movie was based on a book, like I had mentioned. The author of the book actually had a really hard time getting it published at first because so many people did not want to show this depiction of motherhood. They were like, "We do not want
mm.
to show her struggling to be a good mother and being an unfit mother." I mean, a lot of people who read the book said that Eva was an unlikable character, specifically she's an unsympathetic character.
Do
Do you
you
see
think
that
she's
in the
unsympathetic?
film? Ha ha, no, you can't ask me at the same time I ask you. Personally, no, I don't find her as an unsympathetic character. I mean, I haven't read the book, so I can't speak to that, but at least her portrayal in this film, I think Lynn Ramsay does a really spectacular job of showing the viewpoint of the mother in a way that we can sympathize with her not being happy in the place that she is and seeing the reasons why, specifically through Kevin's depiction as a tough child.
Yeah, I agree. I think she is sympathetic. She is flawed. She is not a perfect angel of a human being. She tells her child that she wishes she was in France and that her life was so much better before him. Like, she's
Right.
clearly not doing everything right, but that's human.
Right.
It's fine to address that sometimes people don't click with motherhood. I've seen an interpretation where Eva is implied to have postpartum depression disorder after
Sure.
this pregnancy, that she's just feeling depressed. She isn't connecting with her son. She wants to connect with her son. She tries to connect with her son, but is unable to. Whether that is because he is already a psychopath when he's an infant, which I don't know enough about psychology to comment on that, or if
Sure,
it's
yeah.
because she's dealing with this postpartum and is just struggling as a mother. Like, people struggle as mothers. It's human.
And, dare I take us down this path of the patriarchy, this is something that I think is exemplified in Franklin, like you were mentioning. There is an expectancy on mothers to behave a certain way, as we're talking about. People didn't like her because she didn't behave the way that we want mothers to behave, point blank. Here comes Franklin, happy, really bonding with the child, really just, like, being kinda carefree, and it plays into this idea of that dad's gonna be, like, dad's gonna be the fun dads, and mothers have to be kind of the hard hand. There's a different expectancy on mothers than there are on fathers, supposedly,
Yeah.
or as is portrayed in the patriarchy, right? He can be a little more carefree.
I was actually a lot less sympathetic to Franklin on this watch. The last time I saw this was in theaters. Like, it's been over a
Oh
decade since
God.
I've seen this. But back then, I just saw Franklin as like, yeah, he's the dad. He doesn't know what's going on. He's dumb. Now I'm watching him like,
Mm,
he's the dad. Why the fuck doesn't he know what's going on?
mm.
His child is able to so easily manipulate him, but he has his wife telling him, like, hey, there's something wrong with our son. I think he's doing all this bullshit. And Franklin's like, nah, he's just a sweet boy. I'm gonna get him a bow and arrow for Christmas. It's like,
Yeah, well,
what?
it's that other thing of
Dude.
like, "Hey, believe women." Like, she's saying, "Hey, this is my experience and it sucks." And everyone's like, "Yeah, okay, whatever. That's like, you're a mom. Like, yeah, he cries. Boo-hoo. He's a baby." She's like,
Yeah.
"No, he cries a lot." And Franklin's just like, "I don't know what to tell you, dude."
The bow and arrow thing specifically is weird because I almost saw it as him getting revenge on Eva. That there's that moment when they're reading Robin Hood and Kevin and Eva are finally connecting for like the first time in like 10 years or whatever. And Franklin sees this and he wants to get in, and Kevin is like, "Go away."
Yeah.
Franklin's like, "Whoa, oh my god, my son doesn't love me anymore. He likes the mom more now. I'm gonna get him a bow and arrow. That'll one up her."
He becomes jealous, which is so weird because, dude, this whole time you and Kevin have been bros. Why do you wanna take this away from her? Let me involve
Yeah,
myself on this moment.
even the divorce conversation, like, we don't get to hear the entire conversation, but the movie's called We Need to Talk About Kevin. They never really talk about Kevin.
She
There are
tries.
several times, yes, there's several times when she tries, and every time he's just like, "No." And the divorce conversation is implied to have come out of that she was like, "Hey, I think our son might be really dangerous." And he's like, "No, he's a sweet boy. You're a bad mom. We're getting a divorce."
Right.
Kevin seems to even understand that that is what's being happening. His line is the one that leads us to think that he comes out and says, "How would I not know the context? I am the context."
Going back to what there was one point that you said earlier that with the bow and arrow, that it was him getting punishment on Eva. At first, I thought you were talking about Kevin,
Hmm.
because my whole read of this movie was Kevin does what he does to punish Eva, essentially. Or at least if it's Eva's point of view, that's how she sees it, is that this is punishment for herself. Very selfish way of looking at it, I guess. Where, like, it's so sad that the one thing that bonds them, this Robin Hood that becomes the bow and arrow represented in the bow and arrow, is the thing that he uses to destroy basically their lives, and the lives of his father and sister. And there are several moments throughout the film where it seems like everything he's doing is pointedly at her, like the potty training scene, and him specifically like loving his father and laughing and saying, "Yes, daddy," while looking at her and being upset and cold.
So I have to ask, do you think, because there are a few moments when Eva, we said that she's not always the perfect mother. Do you think any of what she does borders or gets to be counted as abuse? Like, would you consider her to some extent abusive?
Look, we do see the moment where she succumbs to her emotions and does throw Kevin into a wall. So, like, I feel like that flat out, like, that's abuse. But I don't see any other time besides that where she's physical. She tries really, really hard to be a good mom, or at least to be a mother. That I'm struggling to agree with the fact that she is abusive. Like, did you read it as she's abusive?
I think there are more moments of potential abuse. I think the jackhammer scene is definitely abusive, that you should not be intentionally holding this fragile newborn next to a loud as fuck jackhammer. Like
Yeah.
later she's like, "Oh, I'm afraid he cried so much that damaged his hearing." It's like, "No, you're afraid the jackhammer you exposed him to damaged his hearing."
Yeah.
Because it could have. I think that there's some verbal abuse in there when she's like telling him how much she fucking hates him when he's 2 years old or whatever. The throwing, I'm almost more willing to forgive because it is like it feels more like an accident. Like she's not throwing him to hurt him. She's throwing him to get him onto the bed and misses because she's angry. And then it works and he stops potty training. Well, it works, but it works and it teaches him that violence is the answer and violence will make people do things.
Oh, interesting.
When he talks about it as an adult, he compares it to how you toilet train cats by shoving their face in their own shit so that they don't like that, so they'll use the box. And he's not saying this in like, "This is a horrible thing you did to me." He's saying it in a way where it's like, "I was really impressed with that. How you showed your strength
Yeah.
and managed to use violence to get me to do what you wanted. That was impressive of you, mom." It's very much not the right lesson.
Yeah.
That said, going off the idea that these are her memories, I feel like a lot of it is her questioning herself if she's responsible. And I
Yes.
don't think there were many more moments of abuse. I think she's highlighting the few things like, well, I did hold him by that jackhammer. I did tell him that I hated him. I did break his arm, even if it was an accident. And she's questioning for herself if she's abusive, I think.
which is maybe why those moments with the drain cleaner and the gerbil, maybe that's why they're ambiguous too, right? Like, if these are her memories, maybe she really just doesn't remember those moments, and it is her questioning abuse even towards Celia.
I did wanna ask because I think that's such an interesting scene. What do you think happened there? Do you think that Kevin took out his sister's eye, or do you think that it was left out and Celia did it by mistake?
I'm on the camp of it was Kevin, I think,
Yeah.
throughout the film.
I'm on the I think it was both. I think she did leave it out, but I think st
Oh,
it was still Kevin.
yeah. That's I do agree with that because yeah, I think that's a good point in that, like, she knows at this point who what Kevin can do. I mean, she's
Yes.
supposedly looking at the dead, guinea pig in the sink, and yeah, and
Yes.
then she leaves out the drain cleaner.
Even going off your theory that Kevin is punishing his mother, Kevin sees, "Oh, she left the drain cleaner out. Well, let's show her what happens if she's gonna leave the drain cleaner out."
Right, shoving his mother's face in her own piss, right? Or
Yes.
whatever it is, yeah,
And then, of course, Franklin will just blame Eva for it. But even then, it's ambiguous because I don't think that she knows for certain whether or not she put it away. Like, it's was so long ago at this point. Our memories are not very reliable. Like, she
right.
could have forgotten to put it away, or she could have put it away. She doesn't remember.
These are all characters through her memories. I mean, we talked about Franklin so much, but, like, Franklin being, like, overly enthusiastic and always being on Kevin's side and them being buddy buddy could just be her point of view. Like, it's not
That's
necessarily
true.
like that's how it was, but that's how she viewed it to be, is that she felt ostracized from a loving family, and she blamed
Yeah.
Kevin for it. Okay, so when Kevin does finally go to the school and someone says to Eva, "Doesn't your child go to whatever high school it is?" I forget. And she goes to the high school. At what point did you get that she knew that it was Kevin?
I was wondering that as well. Because I think the moment she sees the bike lock, she knows. But I feel like she had to have had the suspicion in her mind before that. The bike
Yeah,
lock is a confirmation. I feel like she's going there and she's hoping it's not Kevin,
totally.
but she knows it's a possibility. And then she sees the bike lock and she knows that he bought bike locks. That's that.
I agree that I think that that would be the turning point. They almost play it in the film like it's not until she sees Kevin she has the reaction of, "Oh my god, it's Kevin," which is fascinating to me because I think it should be the moment of the bike lock of like, yeah, that's confirmed. Like Kevin put that bike lock there. But if we're looking at her this film as like a memory or like an account of her thesis of Kevin was always a problem child, and this is the evidence I will have to show that Kevin was always going to end up being this problem child, then she should have known probably the second that that woman said there was something wrong at the school, you know?
But she hopes she's wrong.
She hopes she's wrong, but like she would have to know from the beginning. If this was her life, would she have not known
Yeah.
from the beginning that something's wrong with Kevin?
So, my one last question before we start comparing the movies. At the end of the movie, Kevin kills a bunch of kids in his school. Apparently, the book specifies it's 11 kids, but it's not
Oh my
specified
god.
in the movie how many. And he also kills his father and his sister. He does not kill his mother. Considering how much he planned this, I have to believe that that is intentional.
Mhm.
Why do you think that he spared his mother?
I think it's him punishing his mom very specifically. I think in Eva's take of Kevin was always a problem child, in that same take, she's saying he's a problem child because of me. And I feel like she does take blame for how he was raised, even though she puts blame on him at the same time, if that makes sense. We do have to consider the ending of look, after all this happens, Eva still shows up for her child once a week. And in the end, she does hug him. Maybe that's her punishment on him, but we have to like think about why does she change after all this? And is it because of what Kevin took away from her? Or is it because of what he gave her? I don't know. Did you have a different reading of why she was spared?
I did, so this is so interesting.
Ooh, tell me more.
I read that he spared her because he respects her. I think that he sees
Oh,
himself in his mother and he sees his mother in himself. And throughout their life, yes, he's buddy buddy with his father, but that's because it's so easy to manipulate his father. It's
yeah,
not so easy to manipulate his mother. She knows what he is. She sees him and he knows that she sees him. He respects her for breaking his arm that one time to get him to use the fucking toilet. I mean, after that scene, he goes and he lies to his father. He covers up for her. I
yeah.
think even in that moment, he was like, "Wow, good job, mom. I'm, you're not getting in trouble for this. That was awesome." Like, I mean, there's almost an Oedipal complex to it in some sense. Like,
Well,
I hate to do that because the Oedipal complex is so much bullshit, but he does kill his father and winds up alone with his mother, who he continues to masturbate while staring at in that one scene when she walks in on him, which is
oh
very
god.
weird. I think he respects her. There's a lot of visual imagery throughout the movie that combines them. That you have like Kevin chewing his nails in the one scene. He like pulls the nails out of his mouth and lines them up. It's really gross. And then a few scenes later, we have Eva in present day doing the same with eggshells. There are eggshells
Mm,
stuck in her food, and she pulls them out, and it's like the same shot as Kevin with the nails. And there's a few moments like that where they're like shot in similar ways. I think he sees that she is someone who he cannot manipulate so easily, that she knows what he is. She taught him this Robin Hood shit. Like, he sees her as an equal, and he wants to keep that around.
that's fascinating.
It's not that he loves her or anything like that, just that he
Right.
respects her, and he does not believe that she is deserving of killing.
I like that we had different viewpoints of it. So what do you see of as the end? Because I gave a little bit about that as well, but your viewpoint on why Eva sticks around and stays with Kevin
Why
now.
she continues to see him?
Mhm.
I feel like she doesn't have much choice. I mean, I think she's punishing herself. Whether or not you consider her responsible, I don't. Like, what the fuck are you even supposed to do in that situation? There is no guidebook for, I think my son is a psychopath. Please help me. Like, she didn't have any
Yeah.
hard evidence that he was going to shoot up his school. That was still a surprise to her. So there wasn't really anything she could have done. But I think she still sees it as her fault. And I think that a lot of the movie is her reflecting on their lives and trying to find the moments where she caused this.
Yeah.
And I think she is punishing herself now. Kevin is the last thing she has left. He took away everything from her that she would have liked. He took away her independence when he was a baby. He took away her husband, who she didn't want to divorce. He took away her daughter, who was an innocent. He took away her reputation. He took everything from her.
Yeah.
But he's also her son. And I think she does still love him despite all that. She's going to keep seeing him and she wants to know. I mean, the last scene of the movie is her asking him why. She still doesn't understand it. She wants to
Yeah.
know if she's at fault or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The point too of she still loves him. She still has that part that, she wants to be maybe not want, but still has to be a mom. And if I can move us into the comparisons, I'm curious this nature versus nurture. Is Eva to blame? Is Franklin to blame? Was Kevin always this way? As you said, that like maybe he was possibly a psychopath from birth. But how do you see that playing into Christine?
I mean, I think it's always a bit of both. I think psychologists have been asking this question forever, and I think it's always a bit of both. Child psychopathy is weird. And we've talked about this on the podcast before in our episode on American Psycho and Better Watch Out. We talked about the about what psychopathy is and the complications of diagnosing a child as a psychopath. And the DSM currently will tell you you shouldn't do that. There is some controversy in the medical field. I'm not an expert. I did like a day or two of research at most on this. Like, I am not an expert. Please do your own research. there is a legitimacy to not wanting to diagnose children as psychopaths because children who score high on psychopathy tests frequently, as they get older, those scores will just go down.
Mm,
Oh, it was just a teenage thing, and now they're fine. They're not a significant danger. It should also be mentioned that many psychopaths are not dangerous. It is a disorder. It's one of the higher risk disorders for violence, but it doesn't that is not presumed. You can be a psychopath and not be violent. You can be a psychopath and a good person. Just want to clarify that. Anyway, there is a counter argument to this though that someone who is a psychopath should still be treated. Well, antisocial personality is the actual disorder. We do want to be able to treat them. And because we won't diagnose children with this disorder, it makes it harder to treat them. There is a childhood version of it, which Kevin would definitely have, called conduct disorder, but it's not the same, and it feels like he needs a better treatment. And I mean, psychopathy doesn't come out of nowhere. If there's an adult with antisocial personality disorder, then they would have been showing those symptoms early on as well. So
sure.
it's very mixed, hard to decipher exactly what to do about this.
But when you say treatment, I mean, that implies nurture, right? Like
Yes,
when there's a
it
lack
does.
of treatment, that is the nurture is it is that is what happens. It is your decision on how their life is being conducted in that moment versus nature, which is the how they're born, and it has nothing to do with our actions, right? The
Yes.
actions that Eva does or that Arnie's parents does or don't do, that's the nurture part as well. But when Eva does see Kevin have these tendencies early on, she doesn't do much about them. She tells Franklin about them, but and tells the doctor about them, who also ignores her fears.
Yeah, that early scene, there's when she goes to the doctor and she's like, "He should be talking by now," and the doctor's like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with him. I wouldn't worry about it."
Yeah,
I'm just watching it. And I'm like, "No, yeah, that's weird though. That is weird.
right?
He should. I'm not a doctor. I don't fucking know, but I
But you should
feel like
ask more about it.
yeah, I feel like a good doctor would be like, "Oh, I don't see anything wrong, so we should probably do a few more tests because he should definitely be talking by now." Like, no, that kid is like 2 years old or something. He's definitely older than my niece, and my niece she's not talking, but she is saying words. She says duck. She says uh-oh. She says
Oh.
mama.
Right, like, we should look into this a little bit more. Yeah, so the nurture there is not necessarily great nurture. I do wanna talk about the Christine because I think Arnie's parents and Christine are interesting. They are very controlling,
You're extremely controlling.
and it's to the point where he really pushes back against them as he goes on his journey to become who he is in the end. And yeah, it's what he's doing is to counteract what they do, but in the same sense, again, that is nurture. Whatever they are doing is causing a reaction in his personality.
Obviously, this is not intentional on their part. They do love their
Right.
son, and everything they're doing is because they believe it's what's best for him. Like, it's hard to completely hate them at the same time. They are doing what they believe is right.
Mhm.
But yes, it is hurting him, it is constraining him, and it is suffocating him. And all of these feelings of rage and anger that are inside of him are just being bottled up. And when you bottle those feelings up, they fucking explode. Do you think he's a psychopath? I don't know. Would he have
Arnie?
antisocial personality disorder?
No, I don't think so. I think, like, I mean, he gets a girlfriend all on his own. He has a great friend that, like, is in a different social circle and I'm sure is, like, a really hard relationship to hold on to throughout high school, but they're still really good friends.
He's kind of abusive to his girlfriend.
That's him also, like, down the line too. But I think he tries to stand up for himself. He tries to, like, do what he wants to do in high school. I think it very much is, like, the society that is pushing him down and his parents restricting him. Not that I blame the parents, which is something that I think is questioned in both films. We, the audience, also society, also does the child blame the parents for what they become.
Yes. Arnie definitely does. Arnie
Yeah.
100% is like, "Oh yeah, my parents. Fuck my parents. Hate them. They suck. And I don't want to deal with them anymore." I mean, when the car is trashed, he literally tells his parents that it's their fault for
Yeah.
not letting him park the car here.
Yeah.
He straight up blames them, and he abuses them too.
He does, and him screaming, and his mom is, like, shaking and so scared, and he's still like,
Yeah.
"No, fuck you, mom."
He assaults his father.
Yeah, he becomes scary, and then, like, yeah, and if we were to take my read of Kevin, ours differ, but Kevin is straight up blaming his mom for what's happening.
I mean, I would agree that I think Kevin is blaming his mom, but I think Kevin isn't blaming her in a bad way. He's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, thank you for making me who I am, mom."
Right. That's where ours differ. Right, yeah. He's happy to get to where he is. And what really hurt me, I mean, we're talking about does society blame the parents also, and we see the parents and her neighbors like punishing Eva because they do somewhat blame her for raising Kevin the way that he is. But it's so painful because she lost her husband and she lost another baby. Like she is
Yeah,
also a victim, and it's so terrible that these people are throwing paint at her house and slapping her on the street when like she is also going through loss, and it is a powerful scene when one of the victims who doesn't die but did get shot by an arrow from Kevin is like going up to Eva and trying to sympathize with her because he knows that she's
yeah.
going through something as well.
And she at first is ready to run away because she's not expecting kindness. She's expecting him
Right.
to be yelling at her and blaming her. And he's like, he understands. I also like that scene. But yeah, they're really fucking horrible to her. And I don't know that much about it, but I think that that is pretty accurate. Society loves to blame the parents.
Got to blame somebody, and they always want to find a reason, and usually saying that oh he was a psychopath from birth doesn't give much of a reason that is something that you can change or something that you can fix.
In Columbine, they tried to blame violent video games. They tried
Yeah.
to blame bullying. People blame mental illness too. I mean, we are talking
Yeah.
about antisocial personality disorder right now, but like people will harbor on like, oh, this shooter was bipolar. Okay, well, that must mean bipolar is going to make people shoot up schools. No, that's not true. People who
Right.
have bipolar are not more likely to be dangerous than anyone else. People who have schizophrenia are not more likely to be dangerous than anyone else. We're all just chasing new stigmas, trying to stigmatize new people, finding new scapegoats. Just, just get fucking gun control, guys. Come on, stop. The issue is fucking gun control.
I agree, but I'm gonna put it in the context of this film where it is fascinating though, Kevin doesn't use a gun. He uses a bow and arrow. It's an interesting choice because it kinda takes the conversation about gun control out of the storyline to where you do need
That's
to
true.
focus on the nature versus nurture of things. And it
Yes.
yeah, which it is, yeah, very fascinating at that point. And I mean, like, Arnie doesn't use a gun either, or Christine doesn't use a gun either,
Yeah, they use a car. But it did come out in 1983. This was not
pre-Columbine.
widely talked about. Yeah, very pre-Columbine, which I mean, he's not doing his crimes at the school, but it is a lot of the similar things. He's targeting the people who are mean to him. He targets his girlfriend. He targets his best
Mhm.
friend. He kills his boss, or Christine kills his boss. Arnie seems upset about that one, but
But it is people what is shown in both is that people recognize troubling behavior in both of our
yes,
I will say school shooters because that's how we're seeing it, or that's the viewpoint that we're reading it as for this episode, and either don't do enough or are not believed or don't have the resources to do something. I mean, even the teacher notices there's an issue. A bully pulls a knife out on him, and all the teacher can do is like, "Okay, go to the office, dude." Like that bully could have stabbed him.
did you sympathize with Arnie before he started killing people?
Yeah. I do believe that he wasn't as troubled by the bullying. I thought that scene was weird. It was more so like Dennis was worried about Arnie in that instance, more than Arnie was worried about himself. He's like, "No, this is just my
Yeah.
life." And then Dennis was like, "No, Arnie, you need to be more concerned about how they're treating you." And then he escalates it. And then Dennis escalates it by
Yeah.
coming into the scene.
In my second watch, I didn't get this on my first watch because I don't think I knew what I was in for yet. But on my second watch, I kind of interpreted that scene as Arnie being upset that he doesn't have the power, that he needs other people to
Oh,
help him. Like, he needs Dennis to come and step in, but he wishes he could have done that himself. He
yeah.
needs the teacher to come in and help, but he doesn't like that he has to tell the teacher on the bully. Be like, yes, he had a knife. Like, he
Yeah.
mumbles that, he's reluctant about it. And on my first watch, that's just like fear of the bully. On my second watch, that's like he fucking hates this. He has no control in the situation. He has no power and he wants power. And then like 2 minutes later, he sees Christine and he's like, "That's it. That's what will get me out of this."
And then he has confidence and has the power because we don't even know. I mean, looking at it from his romantic point of view as well, like he always wanted a girl, but he's like, no, I won't ever get one because he's not confident or doesn't believe he has the power to get one. But we never actually see that Christine like is the reason why Lee gets with him. We actually don't know that why they get together.
Feels like there should be a scene there. Especially because with Lee being such a flat character, it really feels like we needed more of her.
Yeah, I'm just not going to talk about the way women are portrayed in this movie because I
I don't
think
want to suggest
yeah.
anything to make the movie longer, but we probably needed to see why the fuck Lee went out with Arnie. Women aren't portrayed great in this movie, but I will somewhat defend when the men are objectifying the women because I think it's a point. I think when you first watch this movie, it is really easy to sympathize with Arnie in the beginning because you're seeing a trope. You're looking at him and he is the epitome of the trope of this loser nerd kid. He's Peter Parker in the Sam Raimi's Spider-Man before he gets bit.
Mm,
And Dennis is the Harry Osborn then. Like
exactly.
he is such a fucking loser and you just assume that you know this character. But I think a lot of that sympathy and a lot of that assumption is just projection. You're projecting your assumptions and thinking that that's what Arnie is. But none of his behavior actually suggests that. The behavior he gives us is objectifying women. It's, oh, what about this woman? She's not good enough for me. What about this woman? She's not good enough for me. Then a cute girl is flirting with Dennis, and Arnie comes up and starts mocking her right behind her back. It's like
Mm,
he's not he's not doing anything nice. He's kind of being a fucking asshole. Like I'm
yeah.
not convinced that he is who we think he is ever.
That's a really good point. And that goes to what we were saying earlier, right? It's like it's not him becoming any more of a bad person than he already was. Yeah, it's just him coming into his own at the end. This yeah, I like that rate of like this is it's always been set up that he was going to pressure Lee.
He like laughs at some point when someone refers to Lee as his girlfriend. He just laughs and says she's not. Like
Yeah,
he wasn't actually trying to date her. He was just trying to get in her pants.
which is maybe why Christine's like, "Okay, she can die now because she's not going to get you what you want." The whole reason why we're here. And yeah,
Yeah.
he laughs when Dennis is like, "Oh, like, don't you love Lee?" And then Arnie's like, "LOL, no, I love the car."
Oh my god. Well, going off of this, because the idea of the episode is kind of a why do these teens kill, both in the movies but also in reality? And I don't think we're going to get a real answer, but there is this scene in We Need to Talk About Kevin, which we've discussed a little bit, where he's talking about consumerism. He's saying everyone's just watching their TVs, even the people on TV are watching TVs, and the things they're all watching is people like me. How do you think that ties in to both movies? Because it is a really interesting monologue. How do you think it ties in?
I mean, when we talk about media, we're pretty much talking about, like, the consumerist culture, right? Which I didn't see as much in Kevin. The TV thing is interesting, but I never got the hint before that moment that he was doing this for any sort of fame, for any sort of reason. I kind of feel like it's almost this thing, like you mentioned, they blamed Columbine on video games, a bullet point to a possible reason of why teens do this, and thus a bullet point in Eva's mind that she should consider as a reason why Kevin's doing this. So I didn't see it as much of a theme in Kevin.
I agree with you on that because I mean, I think we mentioned earlier that we both kind of see the scene as not being real, that it might be something Eva is imagining.
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't really ever address consumerism outside of it. If we want to take it literally for a moment, then you
Yeah.
might be able to say that Kevin is bored and that it could just literally be that he is bored and this is something he's doing to assuage his boredom for a minute, because that is
Yeah.
a common symptom of psychopathy is boredom. It's also compulsive lying, so Kevin could literally just be lying right now.
He could be giving us what we want. We want to
Mhm.
blame consumer culture or we want to blame the media.
The monologue is chilling, but it feels very much like something an Aaron Sorkin thriller would write, and we all know Aaron Sorkin thrillers aren't real.
And this suppose we go off of that. Suppose we go that Kevin is lying in order to please the broader society that we will pinpoint that we want to blame the media, that we want to blame
Yeah.
consumerism. I kind of seen that also in Christine. I know a lot of people read consumerist culture within Christine specifically because Christine is a bright shiny car. It's not something that I necessarily saw as a main point of Christine. I mean, I did first and foremost look at it as a coming of age story, but it's one that I feel like people kind of project on themselves. They want to believe that Arnie has this issue because of a consumerist culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he's in love with his car. That is like the epitome of consumerism has corrupted this young, innocent child, if you think he was innocent. As a sort of counter argument, it's interesting that the consumerism he's consuming is an unpopular car from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like it's not mainstream consumerist culture. He saw an old beat up shitty car and said, "That's mine now."
But it's when looking at it specifically for a car, I mean, cars arguably started consumerism culture,
Yeah.
right? Because we were able to create something so quickly and something was set as a need. And we do start off the film on the line. And the 50s, I mean, looking at the 50s, hugely consumerist culture. That was the time that we saw, all these kitchen gadgets being pushed, all this future neo-futurism being pushed onto housewives, and it was the time when people really pinpointed like, "Oh, the women are spending the money, so let's start pushing all these new inventions for the home." Whereas like the 80s, we also saw this focus on unionization as well. So also talking about people in the workplace, specifically in consumerist culture. Malls, heavy consumerism, it's another theme that was heavily focused on in the 80s is basically where I'm going with this.
Consumerist culture is not just whatever's mainstream. There are all these different marketing niches, and there is a market for people who like older things. Even if we need to talk about Kevin, like he may make fun of consumerism, but he was inspired by fucking Robin Hood to want to learn archery. Do you think Kevin is repentant in the end?
In terms of like his answer for why he did it,
Yeah.
it's an interesting answer. It kind of almost hints at that he is, which I think goes back to the point of view because I feel like that moment is really the one time that it isn't a shady memory. It's Kevin being Kevin.
Yeah, it is present day, so it's not a memory.
And it's the first time Kevin talks in present day, really.
I mean, it could be a few things. Like, it could be that he is repentant, but only because he's in jail now, and jail fucking sucks.
Right.
He could just be lying for the benefit of his mother, because again,
Yeah.
that is a symptom of psychopathy, is that you possibly lie. Or it could be that everything we've been shown is that unreliable narrator, and he hasn't always been as horrible as we're made to believe through his mother's memories and trying to make sense of it. Maybe he has had
Right.
more humanity than we've been allowed to see.
And that's the one that I was kind of, yeah, pointing towards at the end.
Yeah.
But she also, I mean, in that moment, she also talks about how basically how lucky he is to be a child. And it kind of also says this thing to me of, well, maybe this is also him growing up and kind of like when he becomes adult, he starts to realize. the consequences of his actions, where like the very immature, childlike way of viewing things is just doing things in the moment and not knowing or not being able to understand what the consequences are. It's a late stage development thing that does happen later on.
It's such an interesting movie because we need to talk about Kevin hints at literally every argument that anyone has ever given about why teens kill. All
Yeah.
of those, there is an argument to be made for it in the movie. Even violent video games, they make that argument in the movie. And what you focus on is up to you. And I think that what it ultimately is saying really is just that we don't fucking know.
Yeah.
We don't know. We're not him. We do not know what he's thinking, and we cannot know why he did this.
And that's what makes it scary, and that's what makes it a horror movie.
All right, now it's time for Rob's favorite part of the show, the bone review section, where we rate each movie on a scale of 1 to 4 bones with half bones in between. Starting us today is Devin Shepard, because Rob always says our full name. So,
Oh, he does, doesn't he?
what did you think of Christine?
I really enjoyed this more than I thought that I would. I was like, Stephen King, great. 80s, great. Carpenter, great. What's not to like? But everyone was like, oh, that movie's so boring. It has such slow pacing. I was into it, man. I thought it was a very fun movie. I always loved the teen movies from the 80s. It's just something I love. It was the most Stephen fucking King story, just period. It's got bullies, it's got nerds, it's got regrets over things that I did as a child. It has nostalgia for the 1950s and the way things could have been, and like this like hatred towards women that he always has throughout his stuff. The soundtrack was amazing. The car looked really cool. I liked the effects. Everything in the film was very, very simple, but like done in a way that works. I actually really loved the writing and I loved the dialogue. I really did like Keith Gordon's transformative performance. I think it could be read as a little cheesy, but I think his performance specifically brought so much to the character that anyone else portraying him would have made me not liked Arnie as much, but I loved what he did with it. I love the fantastical realism. There are some really iconic shots in this film that I think we see throughout all these other movies, and like this was the film to make them. So that's always something cool that you have to like really respect in the creative decisions of the director and DP. Yeah, so overall I want to give Christine, let's say 2.5. I know that feels a little low, but yeah, even though I loved everything about it, it just like wasn't that like capture oomph movie for me. And I think specifically because we paired it with Kevin, which we'll talk about, I have to give it a, a lower rating than normal. I don't know. Ask me on another day. All right, David, what did you think of?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and I'm so happy that you enjoyed it that much. When I was watching it, I was like, "Oh my god, Devin's gonna hate this because it's so terrible at portraying women." So I was worried you weren't gonna like it. But I agree with you. Keith Gordon gives an amazing performance in the lead. He's actually a director now. He works a lot in TV, so he's has actually had a pretty good career, even if you don't know his name, and that makes me happy to see. The movie itself, it's really fucking good. I do agree with some of the pacing problems. I think it's that the movie is too long for how little happens, and that I still feel like there are things that are missing. That there are chunks where there's just it feels like a scene is skipped somewhere. My other big complaint is just the climax. I think the climax is really lame, honestly. I do like that Arnie is in the car in the climax, and I think that that's so much more interesting than giving him any sort of redemption. I like that he is not redeemed. But it's just a weird, clumsily blocked. Why does Dennis suddenly know how to use this? Fuck, what was it called? I just looked it up.
Evacuator, extractor.
Something like that. That stupid truck thing that he drives, and he's really good at driving it. Also, why does the cop just believe them in the end? Like, what's their story? To go to like, oh yeah, our friend is dead. We kind of killed him because we didn't realize he was in the living car. Don't worry, we destroyed the living car. That was responsible for everything. And the cop is just like, yeah, okay, that checks out. I love this movie. It's so 80s. just the image of a burning car chasing after some punk is fucking awesome. It's really fun. I enjoy it a lot. Also, 2.5 bones.
Hell yeah. Look at us agree.
Devin, what'd you think of We Need to Talk About Kevin? Devin.
Let me talk about We Need to Talk About Kevin by Devin. That there were so many things. Okay, how am I gonna say this? Because I feel like so much of my review was already in the episode. So let me talk about specifically the things that we didn't mention throughout the episode. One, Johnny Greenwood just fucking kills the score. Every single thing that he fucking touches, man. I just always love that. The score, fantastic. Two, I want to give a special shout out to the wardrobe in this movie because I loved it. There was one Led Zeppelin t-shirt that we see Franklin wear when they're in New York, that we see Eva wear when she is like in a blissful, happy time. And then at one point we see Kevin wear. And that t-shirt tells a fucking story and I love it. Kevin has on always like the 3 t-shirts that he wore ever since he was a kid. It makes you question so much about the reality of things, but also tells you about not only Kevin's character, but Eva's character. And then the performances, it's like it's Ezra Miller and Tilda Swinton. So I don't think that. And I'm sorry, and John C. Reilly. I have to give a shout out to fan favorite John C. Reilly. Like he's my Wi-Fi name. I love him. I cannot believe he was in this fucking movie.
Don't you have a pillow of him?
Yes, and we have a pillow of him.
You should probably specify what that means before people get the wrong idea.
I have a pillow with his face on it, not any other kind of pillow. I don't. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna move on from that. Um, and then, like we said throughout the rest of the episode, I mean, the power of storytelling in this film done in such a very, very specific way where there are so many different reads of this movie. That is fantastic. And I think Lynn Ramsay does a spectacular job of showing a certain type of woman, a certain type of mother, and her experience. I had it at 3.5 bones. I think I'm gonna give it 4. I really,
Nice.
really, really loved this film. I think it's powerful storytelling done in the best way possible. David, you've talked about this movie for so many years. Just give me your actual bone rating.
I'm giving it a 3.5. It fucking wrecks you. I mean, we talked about it for quite a while today, but honestly, you could easily keep going. I want to talk about ambiguity actually. That's how I'm going to focus my review. I'm going to be discussing ambiguity because I feel like we touched on some ambiguity in Christine as well, but I feel like in Christine a lot of that ambiguity comes from creators having different takes. Whereas in Kevin, the ambiguity is extremely intentional and is making a point. That the movie is so much about the things we cannot know. And we're trying to parse out all these details, analyze Kevin and analyze Eva, but we don't know. We can't know. And that's fucking terrifying. That's why it's so scary. This came out in 2011. Like the shooter epidemic was already building. It's only gotten worse since then. I like can't watch the news. Like every news is just telling you about what the new shooting is. I'm like, I'm sure my parents will tell me, and I'll be like, I didn't want to know that. I think bullet wounds are now like the most common cause of death for teens, or one of the most common. It's really fucked up in the US. That's really fucked up. And there is a conversation about it, but the conversation is it's like what we see in the movie where there are people saying this is a problem, then there are other people saying no, this is a problem. The thing you said is not a problem. You're the problem, and we're not getting anywhere. Nothing's being done. Yeah, we can't really know what's going on, but we need to do something. Anyway, that got sad. Sorry. It is a sad movie that's really hard to watch. Still worth seeing because it is so powerful and it is so real.
That about wraps us up for this episode. Do you agree with our reviews? What do you think is the reason behind Arnie or Kevin becoming a murderous teenager? Let us know We're at Cadaver Dogs Pod on Twitter, at Cadaver Dogs Podcast on Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. Catch you soon, Mutts.
Peace. Ain't no shitters ever got between me and Christine.